Welcome to our deep dive into the future.
The future of childhood, no less.
We're going to be taking a look at what childhood might be like in 2050.
2050, that's...
And using UNICEF's 2024 State of the World's Children report to guide us.
The State of the World's Children report.
It's pretty fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's really kind of wild to think that, like, a child born today will be in their mid-20s by then.
Wow.
It really makes you think, like, what kind of world will they inherit?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
That's what this report tries to answer.
Okay, so tell me.
And I think what's really interesting about it is it doesn't just focus on, like, what's happening right now.
Right.
It's really thinking ahead.
Yeah.
And it tries to identify these major, like, mega trends that are really going to shape the lives of children over the next few decades.
So these are huge
Great forces, yeah.
global changes.
Exactly. They're all connected in all sorts of ways.
And these trends could really reshape childhood as we know it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm a little nervous to even ask.
Go for it.
What does the report say about these demographic shifts?
So the first thing that you might be surprised to learn is that the overall number of children globally is actually expected to stabilize by 2050.
Stabilize?
Yeah, it'll kind of hover around like 2.3 billion, which is similar to today.
Okay.
But that's where the stability ends.
Oh.
The distribution of children across the world is going to change dramatically.
Okay, so it's not just about how many children there are, but where they are.
Exactly.
So that makes me think about things like global resource allocation and how countries are going to need to adapt to support their youngest citizens.
That's a really good point.
Especially if these populations are changing so rapidly.
Yeah, and you're already seeing some of these changes happening.
Like where?
Like, for example, you'll see that certain regions in Africa will likely continue to have very young populations.
Okay.
While other areas like East Asia are actually going to see their populations age.
So you have these kind of competing trends going on in different parts of the world.
Yeah, and that creates a whole set of unique challenges and opportunities for those different regions.
Yeah, it's a stark contrast. On the one hand, you have regions with a huge youth population, and on the other hand, you have areas grappling with an aging population.
Right.
So it seems like finding the right balance
to
support both the young and the old is going to be crucial.
Absolutely.
But let's focus on these regions with a lot of young people.
Okay.
The report mentions something called a demographic dividend.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that means?
Certainly. So the demographic dividend is this idea that a large young workforce can actually boost economic growth.
Okay.
But only if the right investments are made in their education and health.
Gotcha.
So imagine a scenario where a country has a lot of young people.
Okay.
And they're entering the workforce, contributing to the economy, and they're supporting a smaller aging population.
It sounds promising.
It can be.
Almost like a built-in advantage.
In a way, yeah.
But I imagine there are also potential pitfalls.
Yeah. You're right to be cautious.
Like what?
So think about it, even with like a booming young workforce, what happens if there aren't enough jobs created?
Oh.
You could end up with a generation of young people facing like widespread unemployment.
Right.
Leading to all sorts of problems. You know, it's
social unrest.
Social unrest.
Yeah.
Political instability.
Even political instability.
So it really is this double-edged sword. It's a reminder that the demographic dividend isn't like a guaranteed win.
No.
It requires careful planning and investment.
Definitely.
To create an environment where those young people can truly thrive.
And you can't forget about the existing challenges these regions face.
Yeah.
I mean, many of them, particularly in Africa, already struggle to provide basic necessities like healthcare and education.
For their children.
Exactly.
And we haven't even touched on the other two megatrends yet.
Right.
Climate change and technology. They add a whole other layer to this already complicated picture.
Exactly. And speaking of climate change, the report paints a pretty alarming picture.
It does.
Of the risks that children face, right?
Yeah, it's concerning.
What does it say?
Well, for starters, nearly half of the world's children
Wow.
already live in areas that are at high risk of climate hazards.
Okay.
And what's really concerning is that this is only projected to intensify.
Oh, wow.
So we're talking about a future with more frequent and intense heat waves, floods, wildfires, droughts, cyclones, the whole 9 yards.
It's hard to grasp the sheer scale of these changes.
It's hard to even imagine.
And if it's challenging for adults, I can't imagine what it must be like for children.
Right.
Growing up with this constant,
threat. And it's not just a future threat, it's happening now.
That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
children are uniquely vulnerable to the impacts of climate change.
For sure.
Both physically and emotionally.
I mean, think about it. Their bodies and immune systems are still developing. So that makes them much more susceptible to heat stress, air pollution, waterborne diseases, all those kinds of things.
So even if a child doesn't experience a direct hit from a climate disaster, they're still vulnerable to the ripple effects.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder.
It's a tough question.
How do you even prepare a child for that kind of future?
It's a daunting task.
It is.
But the report suggests investing heavily in things like climate adaptation.
Okay.
And mitigation strategies.
Mitigation.
Yeah, like things like building more resilient infrastructure, improving healthcare systems, and actually educating children about climate change and how to protect themselves.
So it's about giving them the knowledge and the tools to navigate these challenges.
You can't just shield them from it. We have to prepare them for it.
But beyond like physical preparedness, how do you address the emotional toll?
That's a really important question.
Imagine growing up under the constant shadow of climate anxiety.
Yeah.
Knowing that the world around you is changing in these unpredictable and potentially dangerous ways.
It's heartbreaking to even think about.
It is.
And, the mental health implications of climate change on children are often overlooked.
They are.
They're growing up with this sense of uncertainty about the future.
Yeah.
And we really need to provide them with the support and resources to cope with those feelings.
Yeah, and that kind of highlights how interconnected these megatrends are.
Right.
You can't talk about demographic shifts without considering climate change.
Exactly.
And vice versa.
And then you layer on top of that the rapid advancement of technology.
Right, which has its own set of benefits and risks.
For sure. A double-edged sword, as they say.
Okay, so for example, the report talks about the digital divide, where millions of children lack access to the internet.
Yes.
And all the opportunities that it provides.
That's particularly concerning in regions like Africa.
Right, where we were just talking about the potential of the demographic dividend. It seems like they could be left behind in a world that's increasingly reliant on digital connectivity.
Yeah, imagine a future where educational resources, job opportunities, even essential services are primarily accessed online.
Right, and children without access to the internet.
They'll be at a significant disadvantage.
Yeah, it would really deepen the existing inequalities.
Absolutely.
It's a reminder that technology, while powerful, isn't like a magic solution.
Right, it's a tool.
It needs to be implemented thoughtfully.
Yeah.
And equitably.
Definitely.
To ensure that all children, regardless of their background or location, have the opportunity to benefit from it.
And it's not just about access. We also need to consider the potential risks of technology for children.
Like what?
Well, think about it. They're spending increasing amounts of time online.
Yeah.
Which exposes them to things like cyberbullying, privacy violations, even online predators.
Yeah, that's scary.
It is. It's a whole new world.
It's like navigating a whole new world.
With its own set of rules and dangers.
Exactly. So we need to equip children with like digital literacy skills.
Absolutely.
To navigate this world safely and responsibly.
And we as adults need to be more aware of those potential pitfalls.
Absolutely.
And we need to advocate for policies that protect children in the digital space.
It's about being proactive.
Exactly.
In shaping the digital landscape.
Yeah.
To ensure that it's a safe and empowering space for children.
So well said.
This conversation has been incredibly eye-opening.
Yeah.
We've only just begun to scratch the surface.
It's a lot to unpack.
Of these three megatrends.
Right.
And I already feel this sense of urgency.
I do too.
We're not just talking about abstract trends here. We're talking about the future of childhood.
And the future of our world.
Exactly. So where do we go from here?
Well, the report lays out what they call a business as usual scenario.
Business as usual.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling it's not a future we want to see unfold.
It's not a pretty picture.
So in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore that business as usual scenario.
Okay.
And more importantly, we'll discuss what actions we can actually take to create a more hopeful and equitable future.
That's the important part.
For all children.
I'm looking forward to it.
So we've been talking about these massive forces that are going to shape the future of childhood, demographic shifts, climate change, and the rise of technology.
It's a lot to take in.
It really is. But I'm actually kind of eager to dive into the specifics of that business as usual scenario that the report lays out.
Yeah.
It sounds a bit ominous.
It is a bit of a wake-up call.
Okay.
It kind of assumes that we continue on our current trajectory without any, significant shifts in policy or behavior.
So no major changes.
Basically. And the picture it paints is one of uneven progress, persistent inequality,
Okay.
and, frankly, missed opportunities.
That's concerning. So I imagine this scenario touches on all three megatrends we've discussed.
Yeah, it does. They're all interconnected in really complex ways.
Okay, so can you walk me through some of the key projections
Sure.
that stood out to you?
So one of the most striking findings for me was the projection for child survival.
Child survival.
While the report predicts that newborn survival rates will continue to improve.
Okay, that's good.
It is, but there will still be a significant gap between different parts of the world.
So a child born in one region might have a much higher chance of survival than a child born in another, just based on their location.
It's a harsh reality.
It is. It's hard to even comprehend that in 2050.
Yeah.
A child's birthplace could still have such a profound impact on their chances of survival.
And it's not just about survival.
No.
The report also projects that life expectancy will also increase significantly by 2050.
Okay.
But again, those gains won't be evenly distributed.
So we're looking at a world where some children might have the opportunity to live long, healthy lives, while others face much shorter lifespans.
And it's due to factors that are largely beyond their control.
Yeah, that's really disheartening.
It is a reminder that progress isn't a guarantee.
Right.
And that we need to be intentional about making sure that everyone benefits from these advancements.
Absolutely. Okay, what about education?
Education.
Surely access to education is a fundamental right.
It should be.
That will see, like, universal improvement by 2050, right?
You'd hope so, right? And the report does project significant improvements in global access to education.
Okay.
But there's a catch.
Oh, what's the catch?
There's a looming teacher shortage.
A teacher shortage?
Particularly in regions like Africa.
Oh, wow.
And that could really undermine the quality of education that children receive.
So it's not just about getting children into classrooms.
No.
It's about making sure they actually have qualified teachers who can provide them with a quality education.
You need good teachers.
Right. So what are the factors that are contributing to this projected teacher shortage?
Well, it's a complex issue, but a lack of funding is definitely a major contributor. A lot of countries, especially those with rapidly growing populations, simply don't have the resources to train and employ enough teachers to meet the demand.
Yeah, but I imagine it's more than just funding.
It is. There are other factors at play, too. Things like inadequate teacher training programs, low teacher salaries, and just challenging working conditions in some areas.
So it sounds like addressing this teacher shortage is going to require a pretty multifaceted approach.
Yeah, you need to invest in training and development, ensure fair compensation for teachers, and just create supportive work environments.
Yeah, to attract and retain qualified educators.
You got to make it a desirable profession.
What about gender equality?
Gender equality.
Will girls be doing better in 2050?
So the report does project some progress toward gender equality, but like we've seen with other areas, it's not a universal trend.
Okay.
In some regions, particularly in West and Central Africa, significant gaps are still projected to persist.
In terms of?
Particularly in terms of educational attainment and economic opportunities for girls.
It's disheartening to hear that these gender disparities are projected to continue. You know, it feels like we're moving at a glacial pace when it comes to empowering girls and making sure they have the same opportunities as boys.
It's a slow process.
What are some of the factors that contribute to this persistent gap?
Well, it's a complex mix of things, social norms, cultural beliefs, economic disparities. In many societies, girls still face barriers to education, whether it's because of early marriage, the expectation that they should prioritize household chores over schooling, or even just lack of access to safe and affordable transportation to get to school.
That's tough.
It is. And even when girls do receive an education, they often face discrimination in the workforce, which limits their economic opportunities.
Yeah, it's a systemic problem.
It is.
And it underscores the need for continued advocacy and investment.
For sure.
In programs that empower girls and break down these barriers.
We can't let these projections become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right. We need to challenge these trends and demand better for girls everywhere.
Absolutely.
The report also touches on the issue of conflict.
Conflict.
What does it say about children's exposure to conflict in 2050?
So globally, the projection is that fewer children will live in areas that are at high risk of prolonged conflict.
Yeah. Okay. That's good news.
It is. That's the good news.
What?
But there's a caveat.
There's always a caveat.
And it's a significant one. Some regions like Eastern and Southern Africa, the number of children exposed to conflict is actually projected to increase.
So you have this overall trend of decreasing conflict, which is positive,
Right.
but then these pockets of increasing risk.
Exactly. It creates a really complicated picture.
So what factors contribute to these regional differences in those conflict projections?
Well, it's a complex mix of political, economic, and environmental factors.
Yeah.
For example, competition over scarce resources, which is often exacerbated by climate change,
Right.
can fuel tensions and lead to conflict.
It's all connected.
It is. And weak governance and political instability can also create breeding grounds for violence.
And sadly, children often bear the brunt of these conflicts,
Yes.
facing displacement, violence, and trauma.
It's a stark reminder that peace is fragile
Right.
and that we can't take it for granted. We need to be proactive in addressing the root causes of conflict and investing in peacekeeping efforts.
To protect children in these volatile regions.
Absolutely.
Okay, one final point from the business as usual scenario that I wanted to touch on is urbanization.
Urbanization.
The report predicts that the majority of children will be living in cities by 2050.
Yeah, it's a huge shift.
What are the implications of that?
Well, by 2050, we're looking at a world where most children will grow up experiencing city life.
Okay.
And this presents both opportunities and challenges.
In what way?
Well, on the one hand, cities can offer access to better education, healthcare, and job opportunities.
Yeah.
But they can also be places of inequality, where things like poverty, crime, and lack of access to green space
Right.
can really negatively impact children's well-being.
So it highlights the importance of thoughtful urban planning.
Absolutely.
We need to design cities that are safe, healthy, and inclusive for children.
We need cities that provide access to quality education, healthcare, and recreational opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And cities that prioritize sustainability and resilience
Yeah.
in the face of climate change.
So taking all of this into account, it seems like the business as usual scenario presents a rather bleak outlook.
It's not a great picture.
For many children in 2050.
No.
And it's not a future I would want for any child.
Me neither.
But the report doesn't just leave us with this grim prediction, right?
No, it doesn't. Thankfully, the UNICEF report doesn't stop at just painting a picture of what could happen.
Sure.
It also offers recommendations for what we should do to create a better future for children.
So it's a call to action.
It is a call to action for individuals, for governments, for organizations, for everyone.
I'm ready to hear about those recommendations.
Okay.
I think we could all use a dose of hope right now
I agree.
and a roadmap for how we can make a difference. So what are some of the key actions that the report suggests?
So the report emphasizes three main areas of action.
Okay.
The first is preparing for those demographic transitions that we discussed earlier.
Okay.
And this involves investing heavily in education,
Okay.
starting from early childhood all the way through secondary school.
Right.
We need to expand access to quality education,
Mm-hmm.
support teacher training and development,
Right.
and ensure equitable access for girls.
Yeah.
We also need to focus on creating job opportunities for young people, especially in those regions that are experiencing that youth bulge.
Right. If we want to harness the potential of the demographic dividend,
Exactly.
we need to equip young people with the skills and the opportunities that they need to succeed.
You got it.
But it sounds like it goes beyond just education and job creation.
It does. Social safety nets are also critical.
Social safety nets, like what?
Things like paid parental leave, universal child benefits,
Mm-hmm.
and programs that provide a safety net for families
Okay.
who are facing economic hardship.
So it's about creating a supportive environment where families can actually thrive,
Exactly.
not just survive.
It's about investing in the well-being of children and families as a whole,
But what about the physical environment?
the physical
We
environment.
talked earlier about the growing threat of climate change.
Yeah, that's a big one.
What can we do to protect children from its worst effects?
So that brings us to the second area of action,
Okay.
investing in climate and environmental adaptation, mitigation, and education.
Okay, break that down for me.
So first, we need to make our communities more resilient to climate shocks.
More resilient.
Yeah, this means strengthening our infrastructure, including things like schools and healthcare systems,
Right.
to withstand extreme weather events.
So building for a future where climate change is a reality?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We also need to adapt our social safety nets to provide support for families who are displaced or impacted by climate disasters.
So we need to be proactive
Absolutely.
and build for that future.
And alongside those practical adaptations, climate education plays a crucial role.
Climate education.
Yeah, we need to empower children with the knowledge and skills
Mm-hmm.
to understand climate change and be part of the solution.
Okay.
So this involves integrating climate education into school curricula,
Right.
but also supporting community-based initiatives that engage children in environmental stewardship.
So it's about raising a generation that isn't just aware of the problem,
Right.
but is equipped to tackle it head on.
Exactly. Give them the tools they need.
It's like adaptation can only take us so far.
It's true.
We also need to address the root cause of climate change, right?
Absolutely. Mitigation is essential.
Mitigation.
You need to drastically reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, how do we do that?
Well, there are a lot of ways, but some of the key things are transitioning to clean energy sources, investing in sustainable transportation, and promoting energy efficiency.
Okay.
The report emphasizes that bold action from governments and businesses is critical.
Right.
But it also acknowledges that individual choices matter. Every bit counts.
Every little bit helps.
Exactly. We all have a role to play in reducing our impact on the planet.
So we've talked about preparing for demographic shifts and tackling climate change. What's the third area of action that the report highlights?
So the third area focuses on technology.
Okay.
And the key here is to ensure that technology serves children's best interests and that its benefits are shared equitably.
Right.
So remember we talked earlier about the digital divide.
Yes.
Closing that gap is essential.
Okay.
This requires investment in infrastructure to expand internet access in underserved communities, but it also means addressing affordability barriers
Right.
so that internet access isn't a luxury.
It should be a right.
It should be a right as essential as electricity or clean water.
It's about leveling the playing field and making sure that all children have the opportunity to participate in the digital world.
But it's not just about access. It's also about making sure they can use technology safely and responsibly.
Digital literacy.
Digital literacy, exactly. We need to teach children how to navigate the online world safely, how to identify misinformation, and how to protect their privacy.
So we need to raise a generation of savvy digital citizens.
Yeah. And just as we have laws to protect children in the physical world,
Right.
we need to create a legal framework that protects them from online harms.
Like?
It's like cyberbullying and exploitation.
Yeah, it feels like a constantly evolving challenge.
It is, especially with technology changing so rapidly.
What about the development of new technologies?
Yeah.
How can we ensure that those technologies are designed with children in mind?
That's a crucial question. The report calls for ethical guidelines and robust oversight mechanisms for things like artificial intelligence and neurotechnology.
So we need to be thinking ahead.
We need to anticipate the potential risks of these emerging technologies.
And make sure they're developed and used in ways that benefit children.
Exactly. Technology should serve humanity.
And especially our youngest generation.
It shouldn't be a force that widens existing inequalities or creates new risks.
So we've got these three big areas of action.
Right.
Preparing for demographic shifts, tackling climate change, and governing technology responsibly.
It's a tall order.
It feels like a pretty daunting to-do list for humanity.
It's a big challenge.
But the report seems to suggest that we can turn things around.
I believe we can.
That a more hopeful future is possible.
Definitely.
If we act decisively.
The future isn't predetermined. It's shaped by the choices that we make today.
So this report is really offering us a roadmap. They're creating a world where every child, regardless of their background or their location, has the opportunity to thrive.
That's the goal.
That's a future worth fighting for.
I agree.
But I have to admit, these recommendations are so broad.
They're big picture ideas.
I'm left wondering, what can I, as an individual, actually do?
That's a question a lot of people ask.
To make a difference, it's easy to feel overwhelmed.
I understand.
By the scale of these global challenges.
I get it. It can feel like you're just one person.
Yeah.
But in the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore some practical steps that we can all take.
I like the sound of that.
To contribute to a better future for children.
We've explored these potential futures facing children in 2050, and let's be honest, that business as usual scenario, it wasn't exactly a walk in the park.
It was a little bit grim.
But the report also offers hope.
It does.
It outlines these steps we can take to create a better future, but it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of these global challenges. So what can we as individuals really do to make a difference?
It's a natural question to ask, and I think it's really powerful that you're asking it, because sometimes these huge trends make us feel powerless. But the truth is, our actions, even small ones, they can create a ripple effect.
Okay.
So think of it this way. If enough pebbles are dropped into a pond, they can create waves that reach the far shore.
I like that.
Our actions are those pebbles.
Okay, so where do we start dropping those pebbles?
Well, we've talked about these 3 big areas of action demographic shifts: climate change and technology. So let's start with preparing for those demographic shifts. One of the most impactful things you can do is support organizations that are working on the ground to improve the lives of children in regions with rapidly growing populations.
So donating to charities that focus on education, healthcare, or child protection.
In those areas.
Yeah, think about those places where the need is greatest.
I've done that before, but it's easy to feel like a drop in the bucket. Like, does it really make a difference? It does. Even small donations can have a significant impact, especially when they're channeled through reputable organizations with a proven track record.
Okay.
These organizations, they're on the front lines addressing the immediate needs of children, and they're working to create long-term solutions.
And it's not just about money, right?
It's not.
I remember a while back I was volunteering for this literacy program, and it was incredibly rewarding.
That's awesome. And your time and skills are valuable resources, too.
Yeah, okay.
Many organizations rely heavily on volunteers for a whole range of tasks: fundraising, advocacy, tutoring, mentoring.
Yeah.
So think about your own skills and interests. What could you offer? Translation services, web design, legal advice, event planning.
Yeah.
There are countless ways to get involved.
I like that. It reminds me that we all have something to offer.
We do.
Okay, what about climate change?
Climate change.
That one feels so massive and systemic.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Are there any individual actions that can truly make a dent in that challenge?
So it's true that individual actions alone won't solve climate change.
Right.
But that doesn't mean we're powerless. We can be part of the solution in 2 main ways.
Okay.
First, by reducing our own carbon footprint, and second, by advocating for systemic change.
Okay, so reducing our own impact on the planet. I've been trying to be more mindful of my consumption habits, choosing energy-efficient appliances, walking or biking instead of driving whenever possible, cutting back on meat. But it's easy to slip back into old habits.
It's a journey, not a destination, and every small step counts.
Okay.
So look around your home, your workplace, your daily routine. Where can you make more sustainable choices? Can you switch to renewable energy sources, reduce your food waste, buy less stuff?
Yeah.
It's about making conscious choices that align with your values.
And using our voices to push for those larger scale changes, right?
Yeah.
So voting for leaders who prioritize climate action, supporting businesses that are committed to sustainability, having conversations with friends and family about the issue.
Exactly. The more people who demand action on climate change,
Yeah.
the more pressure there will be on governments and corporations to implement meaningful policies and make responsible choices.
So our voices do matter.
They do. Your voice matters.
Okay, what about that third area, governing technology responsibly?
That's a big one.
Especially relevant to anyone who uses the internet or social media, which is pretty much everyone these days.
It is. It's a crucial area, and it's one where individual actions can have a real impact.
Okay, like what?
One of the most important things you can do is be a critical consumer of information.
Okay.
The internet is flooded with misinformation, and it spreads so rapidly.
It really does.
So before you share anything online, take a moment to pause and ask yourself, is this accurate? Is this from a reliable source?
So we all need to become better fact checkers.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the whirlwind of social media, but we have a responsibility to think critically about the information that we consume and share.
And it's not just about misinformation, right?
It's not.
We also need to be more mindful of the data that we're sharing online, both our own and our children's.
Definitely.
So read privacy policies, adjust your settings, have conversations with your kids about online safety.
Yeah, these simple steps can make a big difference.
It's about taking control of our digital lives and setting those healthy boundaries. I think back to when I was a kid and the internet was this exciting, new, uncharted territory.
I remember those days.
And now it's so integrated into our lives, we almost take it for granted.
We do.
It's important to step back and think critically about how we're using technology and how it's impacting our lives.
Especially the lives of children.
Exactly.
And I think it's interesting. We often think about the impact of technology on children, but it's equally important to consider how our own technology use is shaping their world.
Yeah.
We're modeling behaviors for them. We're setting norms.
It's true.
It's a reminder that our actions have ripple effects, not just in the digital world, but in the real world too.
This conversation has been incredibly thought-provoking. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day, and forget about these larger forces that are shaping our future. But I'm walking away feeling a renewed sense of hope.
Me too. I think the future isn't predetermined. It's shaped by the choices that we make today individually and collectively.
Right.
And by taking action, by dropping those pebbles into the pond, we can create those waves of change that will lead to a better future for children everywhere.
So to our listeners out there,
yes,
we leave you with this final thought.
Okay.
Imagine a child born in 2025.
2025.
What kind of world do we want them to inherit in 2050?
That's a good question.
What role will you play in creating that future? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.